All right, good morning. My name is Derek. I work in the financial aid office here at Western Michigan University. Um, I kind of just wanted to open up and talk to you all about the cost of going to Western, and also I kind of wanted to talk to you about how you can try to cover that cost. So the first thing that we really wanted to kind of discuss is the indirect cost versus the direct costs. So your direct costs are going to be your tuition and fees, and you're going to want to try to look at that for the whole year. And then you're also going to want to look at housing as well as your kind of direct costs. The indirect things that I guess some people don't consider when they're going to school is you want to make sure that you have money for books. You want to make sure that you have money for any car repairs or just making sure your car, if you're going to use a car, making sure that that's all together. You want to make sure that you have funding for if you're going to park on campus, you're going to want to make sure you have money for that. So there's just several things that you want to kind of consider outside of just the tuition and fees and just the housing piece. So,
Yeah, and just to kind of go off of that, so when we're referring to indirect costs, that just means things that are not directly billable by WMU. So costs that you may have, but not something that will actually show up on your bill from Western.
Great. Thank you both. I'm going to back up a second and introduce these guys. I know Derek already introduced himself. Again, I'm Michelle from Family Engagement here at Western, and we also have Taryn from Financial Aid. Can you guys tell us a little bit about your roles over in Financial Aid so people will know, like if they call the office, are they likely to speak with either of you, or is that something that's not in the role that you guys have there?
So we are both what our office refers to as financial. So likely, if you are calling our office directly, you're not immediately going to be speaking with one. The calls is and Bronco Express, and we'll touch on exactly the role of Bronco Express in a little bit here, but your question or your situation requires a little bit more time or an in-depth answer that maybe one of our phone representatives can't answer for you, then it is possible that you would be transferred to one of us or one of our other financial services specialists. But basically what we do is a lot of just the processing of documents and things like that. We do take one-on-one appointments with students and families.
so I would basically say that anything that's not general is kind of the things that we handle. So anything that's more in depth to your situation is kind of what you would be referred to us for. So.
Perfect. And with that being said, I do want to note that this morning we're going to cover that general information. Feel free to comment on our Facebook page if you have any questions that you would like answered. Although, like I said, at this time, we're going to keep conversations general. So if you have specific questions, definitely we would encourage you to reach out to the Office of Financial Aid. But any general questions, we are happy to answer here in this live segment this morning. So we can move on to our next topic. Let's talk a little bit about how families can cover that gap beyond what might be offered through the FAFSA or what their student might receive in scholarships. How can families prepare for that, and what can they do to fill in that gap?
Yeah, so I guess I'll kind of go even a little further back and start talking about the financial aid process itself. So for most people, you will fill out, of course, the FAFSA, the federal financial aid application. Once we receive that FAFSA and get it processed, you will then receive your financial aid offer. So that will include any institutional aid that you are eligible for based on the information on the FAFSA, as well as, of course, all federal financial aid. So that could be student loans, it could be federal or institutional grants, depending on certain scholarships do also require the FAFSA to be submitted along with that as well. So, but once you receive that financial aid offer, there may be, of course, a gap between what your actual bill comes out to be and what we've already offered you. So that is probably one of our most common questions is how do I cover that gap? So there's of course a lot of different options that you have. Western does offer several different payment plan options. So if you are planning or have prepared to potentially pay that out of pocket, you could set up a payment plan through accounts receivable. A lot of times we'll see that just being like monthly payments throughout the semester. Western does actually bill semester by semester, so you'll have, for example, a fall bill and then a spring bill separately, and then summer terms as well if your student is taking classes then. So beyond the payment plan or just paying in full out of pocket, there are of course other federal loans. So there's what we call the Federal Parent Plus loan. That is probably one of the most common ways, that people use to help cover that gap. So again, that's just a federal loan, but it is for parents. So that's something that parents take out. It's entirely in their name. The application process is currently done directly through Western. And then beyond that, there are of course other private loans and things like that. And then of course just applying for other scholarships. You know, we always want to see students
Absolutely.
get the free money first. So
Right, that's a great place to start.
yeah.
Where would families find that information, or how could they direct their student to get information about scholarships that are available through Western or maybe outside of Western as well?
So you could just go to WMU Financial Aid Scholarships page, and then I think at the bottom there's a link you can click on, and it'll give you a list of the different scholarship opportunities that you may be able to apply for.
So really, I guess what we recommend with families is the best place to start would be on our website. There are many different ways or many different places you can get scholarships from. So they can be directly from Western, outside scholarships, different, of course, different departments on campus and things like that. So the website is really the best place to at least start, because that does very clearly outline, these are different options for different departments on campus and what they offer, how to apply for them, what the qualifications are, and everything like that. So really that's the best place to start. If you are still a high school student, we also recommend talking with and meeting with your high school counselor, because they'll have a lot of that information about scholarships that may be available in your community, or maybe even from your high school directly, and things like that.
And if I could just throw in too, the earlier the better. So you definitely want to make sure you're paying attention to deadlines that you might see online. And the faster and the earlier you can start applying, the better opportunity you may have, the better chance you might have. So
yeah, because we have scholarships. So I know that like admissions has scholarships with deadlines starting as early as November for the following academic year. So you definitely want to start getting those applications in as early as possible.
Great. That's great advice. It's one thing, like you said, there's a lot of money out there for students. They just have to look. And I believe there was an update to your website where it now includes a way for families and students to apply or get information about scholarships that are external to Western as well. And it will provide them information about where they can apply and what money might be available outside of the university. So definitely look into that. Okay, how about we talk a little bit about the future of students' financial aid. And what we mean by this is, as your student progresses through their time here at Western, there may be a difference in their financial aid, there may be a difference in their costs. So if you guys could speak to that a little bit, that would be helpful.
Yeah, so it's definitely important that, or I guess just to mention that not all aid, especially when it comes to scholarships and grants and things like that, some of those are not necessarily renewable. So it may be something you receive one year, but not necessarily the next year. So it's definitely, something to keep in mind when you are filling out that FAFSA and receiving the financial aid offer letters, or even really when you're getting offers to begin with, especially for scholarships, make sure you're checking and paying attention to whether or not they are renewable, and then what the criteria for those renewable scholarships might be. because it might not always be guaranteed. You may have to maintain a certain GPA or other requirements or things like that in order to remain eligible. For things like that over the years. Typically a lot of the federal financial aid, I would say, does kind of remain relatively the same as long as your financial situation, stays about the same during your time here. It is pretty likely that you will have a very similar financial aid offer package throughout your time here, but it all, of course, depends.
There's so many different factors.
Yeah, if government or institutional funding changes, of course, that of course can change what we are able to offer. So it's not always guaranteed that things will be awarded to you year after year. It just kind of,
Right.
I hate to say that it depends, but it really just depends. So it's really just important that when you do receive financial aid offers, that you are paying attention to whether or not they say
Absolutely.
they are guaranteed or not.
Right. So just having that awareness, being on top of, okay, I have this year, but next year this won't apply, and factoring that in your planning.
Yeah, and you're always, of course, we encourage people to ask, if they're not sure if it will be something that they get every year or if the amount will change or something like that.
Right. Perfect. What about if a student needs to take a leave from school? Say they need to take a deferment. That affect their financial aid?
So you want to make sure that you do apply for a deferment through your loan lender, and you can contact the school if you don't know who that lender is for your federal loans. You want to make sure that you're doing that deferment so that your loans don't go into default, or that you don't have any issues with those loans. Because if there does become an issue, that then would affect your financial aid. So just jumping ahead and making sure that you're keeping in touch with your lender to make sure that there's no default status for your loans.
So if students, once they either drop below half-time enrollment, or if they have to take another leave for some reason, that you do have a certain amount of time, like a grace period, where you won't be required to make payments back on loans and things like that. But yeah, it is, if it's something that you're planning, it definitely is important to stay in contact with the lender. Something else to keep in mind that a lot of people don't always know is that there is a lifetime limit to how much time you can spend in deferment. So if you are able to, if you're in a financial situation where you can make payments, it's sometimes can be better for you to just make the payments rather than going into deferment. But for the most part, while you're still enrolled in school, you won't be required to make payments on your loans or anything like that. But if you ever, like I said, stop attending or drop below halftime, your lender will contact you, trust me. But it's always important to stay on top of it as well.
Okay, great, thank you. What if a family's financial situation changes while their student is here at Western? What steps should they take? Should they reach out to your office? What would be good advice for them if that were the case?
I would definitely say reach out, give us a call, and then we'll basically ask what kind of things have changed since you filed the FAFSA, and we'll try to see if there are some adjustments or things like that we might be able to make to reflect your more current situation. So
great. I think the common theme is, if you have a question, definitely reach out, because
Always.
things can be so specific to your situation. So definitely do not hesitate to reach out. What if one of our families has more than one student here at Western? What type of process would they go through? Do they need to fill out a FAFSA for each student? What does that look like?
So basically, the process for having multiple students attend Western, it's basically the same process it would be if there was only one student. So each student does need to have their own FAFSA on file. It's even possible that if you have, siblings or something, one student may be selected for the federal verification process, and maybe one student won't. So definitely every process for each student is very individual. It might be the same, of course, parent information on the FAFSA for each one, but every student needs their own application. Every student has their own file, I guess, so to speak. So it is all, it's basically just the same.
Okay.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't offer a tuition discount or anything like that. I know we get that question a lot. If they have multiple students attending, do we get a discount? And unfortunately, no. But the process basically is still the same. So you would just treat it like anyone else.
Okay, perfect. And you mentioned just a second ago about the verification process. Could you speak to that a little bit? I know we've had a few phone calls from families saying we've submitted everything and my student is still getting an email or a reminder that something needs to be verified. What does that mean and what should families do?
Yeah, so with the FAFSA application, there is it is basically a random selection process where the federal government may select you for a process what we call verification. All that is just us collecting some additional documentation from you to verify that what you put on your FAFSA is actually correct. So really what we tell people is, like I said, it is just kind of a random selection process. So just make sure that once you submit your FAFSA, you are immediately checking your WMISH email account and looking on your GoWU portal, because that is where we will contact you and let you know if we need any additional documentation and then what that is. And then once we do collect all that documentation, we have about a 5-day processing window that we typically tell people. As we get closer to the start of the school year and things like that, sometimes that time may get a little bit longer. But once you submit the documentation, we send regular updates as to where we are at in the process with it. So once we've received it, we'll let you know. And then if there's anything more that we need from you, we'll continue to send out reminders to them. So that could possibly be why. But yeah, so it's, again, just important to stay in contact with us, and especially checking that Western email account, because all communication that our office does to students and families will be directly to the Western email account, not a personal email account.
Okay, and that's a really good point to bring up, especially for our incoming students. We cannot remind you enough to check that WMISH email. You probably had received when you received your acceptance letter, you would have received information about how to access that account. Definitely check that regularly. You'll find information about scholarships, any information from financial aid, residence life. The university will use that as their main means of communication with you. So definitely check that WMISH email regularly, even before you get here on campus. But you're a Bronco now, so check your email. Okay, we touched on this a little bit a few moments ago. What if a student has to drop or withdraw from a class? How will that impact their financial aid or their eligibility? I know you talked about going less than half time, how that would impact things. What if, say, they have 18 credits and they drop to 15? Would that impact their financial aid or any eligibility?
A change like that, in particular, most likely would not. We highly encourage students, though, if they are considering dropping or withdrawing from classes, to reach out to us first, just because, again, it is so circumstantial.
Sure.
Oftentimes, if a student, especially if they do a complete withdrawal, so they're dropping or withdrawing from all of their classes, that oftentimes will result in us having to bill back some or potentially all of their financial aid. So that, again, it's all very circumstantial. Sorry.
If I could just jump in and say that also you want to consider that you might, if you withdraw from all your classes, you might go into what we call unsatisfactory academic progress. So what that basically means is that you're not completing enough credit hours to stay in satisfactory progress to receive financial aid. So that's why we also want to encourage that you definitely give us a call just to make sure and see where your standing is before you withdraw or pull out from all of your classes.
Right.
Yeah, and then definitely different types of aid have different qualifications. So in order to keep eligibility for your loans, you have to be at least half-time. Then definitely scholarships and grants all have their own individual parameters as to
Right.
what the eligibility requirements are. So if you're in a situation where, if it's something like you're going from 18 to 15 where you're still considered full-time,
Right.
it's less likely that you're going to have an issue, but still, we always, again, just recommend reaching out. But especially if you're going from full-time to half-time or three-quarter time or anything like that, that's where some things can change. So it's always best to reach out and double check. And
Absolutely.
yeah, the timing of everything is very important too. So yeah, always best to ask first.
Right, so put that on your list if you are considering dropping any classes. Always double check. Good to know. How about any financial updates or financial aid updates and reminders? You mentioned about checking the email. Do you guys still send out the paper letter? Do you get something in the mail that says, hey, you have this scholarship, or this is your financial aid award, not reward. It's a reward.
So for the up and coming academic year, we have decided to email your offer letters now instead of mailing those out. So we definitely encourage that you check your GoWMU email. Again, I know we keep saying that, but all of our contact is through that email. So you definitely want to make sure you're checking that.
Yeah, and that getting the email, like you said, is a new process for us, and that is something, especially if you're an incoming student, that's something that Western might be doing differently than other schools that you have applied to or have been admitted to. So, but we are trying to go paperless.
Okay, so definitely check that email account. How about if we could take a minute just to talk about Bronco Express, which is an extension of your office. Could you take a few minutes to explain the function of that office and how it compares to the Office of Student Financial Aid when people might want to go to Bronco Express as opposed to your office?
I would say the main difference is that payments are done through Bronco Express and not through our office. They handle a lot of the general financial aid questions. They're kind of like the front door, or the gatekeepers, I guess. So you'll want to talk to them about, more of the general questions and payments. And again, when things are a little more in depth, they'll refer you to our office. So that's kind of the main difference, I think, between our two pieces of the same office.
Right, and yeah, just to add to that, so they can answer questions, of course, about financial aid and billing. They also, they are located in the Bernhard Center currently. They also have counselors, I guess, you would call them, down there that do walk-ins on a daily basis, where if a student or a parent wants to meet with us up in the financial aid office, we are mostly by appointment only.
Right.
Is at least what we try to encourage. So we do offer in-person appointments and over the phone appointments, but we encourage people to start at Bronco Express, because first of all, it's going to be probably faster because they do walk-ins every day. But if it is, like you said, something that's a bit more complex, then they would refer it up to one of us, basically.
Okay, great. And again, that's located on the lower level of the Bernhard Center at the moment. Will they be moving to the new student center, do you know?
I'm not sure if
We're
that's
not sure
they're
decided yet.
Okay. All right. And I think probably one of the biggest questions that our new families have is, what is proxy or authorized user access? A lot of our families do contribute toward their students' cost of their education and would like to be able to view their bills or make a payment. What type of access do they need? What type of access would their student need to grant them so they would be able to have access to that information?
So there's two different terms that families may hear a lot. So there's proxy and the authorized user. So proxy access, of course, by law, especially at this point, most students are of age. We can't share any of that information, any financial information with parents or anyone else besides the student. So the proxy access allows the student to kind of give their parent or whoever it may be access to have those conversations. So now a parent would be able to call up Western on the student's behalf and have those conversations with anyone. And so the student gets to decide what access the parent does have. So it can be financial information, it can be their grades or things like that. So the student does have the freedom to select how much information the parent has
Right.
access to, whatever they're comfortable with. So that is entirely up to them. That's done through their GoWMU portal, so it's all done online. The authorized user access basically allows a parent to kind of create their own account so that they can handle some of the billing stuff that's done online and make payments online and things like that.
Perfect. And speaking of online payments or even Bronco Express payments, can families use like a credit card to pay online or at Bronco Express if they wanted to make a payment on their student's account?
So they can use a card online, but in Bronco Express, I believe they only do cash and checks in
Okay.
person. Yeah.
Okay, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else that you guys can think of that we should share with families that might be helpful? Any common questions that you hear in your office that you think might be running through someone's mind at this point?
It varies.
And while they're thinking, if you have any questions out there, viewers, feel free to send those in. Even if it's after the fact, we will monitor the Facebook page and follow up on any comments that are posted, but feel free to send your questions in. We'll be live for a few more minutes to answer those.
Yeah. And again, I know that we've said this a lot, but everything in financial aid is just can be so very circumstantial that we just highly recommend that if you have questions, we're always available to answer them. It's better to get the right answer for you and your situation, because your situation may be completely different than someone else's. So it's always better just to ask, even if you think you know, just double check with us, and we're always happy to answer those questions.
Great. That is helpful.
I think another question that I get a lot is, what's the difference between a subsidized loan and
Oh, yeah.
unsubsidized loan? So basically the main difference, they both collect interest, but the subsidized portion, the government's going to be covering your interest while you're in school. So a lot of students really want to go for that subsidized portion first. So
Is there a difference in the application process for that, or can a student select one over the other? What's that process look like?
So it would be the same process. You would just complete your FAFSA, and we basically do what's best for the student first. So we're going to award the subsidized portion before we try to do unsubsidized. So
Yeah, as long as they're eligible.
as long as,
Mhm.
yep.
Okay, great. I don't see any questions coming in. Shocks me, honestly. But that's good. Must be we've covered everything that people were thinking about. All right. Well, like I said, we will monitor our page for any additional comments that may follow up after our broadcast today. Feel free to reach out to Family Engagement Office or Financial Aid if you have any additional questions as well. And we will look forward to seeing you next time on our next Facebook Live post.
Thank you.
Thank you both, Taryn and Derek, for coming.
No problem.
Okay.
I feel like Mark Rubio trying to drink some water.